Steve, here we are. We're going to talk a little bit about the storyline approach. But first, I'd like you to tell us about yourself, about your background, and how it all started. Will you do that?
Certainly. At a time in the mid-60s, 1965, when there was a new school law in Scotland that we call the Primary Memorandum, I was working at the college, and the Primary Memorandum introduced a more holistic idea of the curriculum. They created an area for the first time which was called Environmental Studies, which was an attempt to try to integrate the parts of the curriculum that previously had been taught through textbooks of history and geography and science and health and so on.
Yes.
And teachers were rather concerned, as you can imagine, and puzzled by the circumstances they now found themselves in, because they hadn't been trained to work in this way. This resulted in 1967 of the forming of a small team of staff tutors. Initially there were 3 of us who were seconded from departments in the college to work full-time with teachers. In fact, we say to children that we're educating them for life. And it seemed as if there wasn't very much life in the classroom. And we liked the idea of bringing aspects of life as examples in, because then you can demonstrate very easily why children are learning what they're learning. If in fact you can't integrate skills that the children are being taught into an aspect of everyday life, then why are we teaching it? What's the point? What's the purpose of this? And so that aspect was very, very clearly in our minds as the story form took hold. What we noticed was that when you take an example of life outside, it becomes a story. So we found quite quickly that actually starting with the visual gave us an incredible motivation for supporting children in their learning. Children, even children who have learning difficulties, if they have made something in the street, they have ownership of that street. Not only that, but you can talk about something that they can touch and see and describe in words and so on. You're not asking them to imagine, to hold in their imagination so many ideas all at once. You're using what is theirs and what they are happy to talk about as a focus for the start of the study and the start of the development.
And you could, from the start, you could see that as an expression of their way of understanding life.
It was really an example of how very young children play. In the kindergarten and first class, you can see they build blocks together and it's a house. And they'll pretend that this is a car, a block of wood, it's a car, and they're driving along the main road. They're quite happy to imagine a lot into almost nothing. And what we did was to make that more sophisticated and suggest simple art craft techniques, model building, that would help teachers feel more comfortable with this. And a great problem then was, how do you persuade teachers to do this, to see the model as a starting point? At that time, we didn't call it storyline. We called it topic work, and this was topic work. And
because there was no line in it.
There was no line in it at that time. It wasn't as clearly defined as a story with a start and a development and an ending. When you asked me about ownership in the first, I was thinking of this kind of ownership. But one of the things that I would deny, and this is a good opportunity to do this, is people say, "Is this your idea?" And it's not my idea. It's an idea that was born from a team of people who were working with hundreds of teachers and head teachers and advisors and so on. And there is you've been in service a long time too, and you know how these things develop. There are so many influences, and I see myself as an agent. In my strength, I think, has been in the amount of travelling I've been able to do, in the amount of teaching of courses I've been able to do in various places, as an agent in sharing this experience. But there is no way that I would claim the ownership on that in that way of Storyline.
Okay, so it's more a mutual ownership for many teachers.
Oh, many teachers. And when I look back, it's impossible to identify clear decisions about things happen in this kind of developmental way, and it's a slow process, as always in education.
Steve, now when you've seen so many different people work with it and talk about it and explain how they work with it, what do you think is the basic learning concept in it? Well, what's that?
The power, I think, of Storyline is this idea that there is a partnership between the teacher who becomes a professional designer. I mean, that's a lovely feeling for a teacher. A teacher does not want to be seen as being a person who is passing out books all the time. Anyone can do that. I mean, that doesn't take years of training, and the decisions have to be made. The teacher is a designer of good questions and modelling good questions. It's a lovely feeling for the teacher that he is not an expert. There's no demand. And the teacher's role is one of facilitator, of chairman, of agent, again, in the child's learning. The children, in this paradox, have the ownership of the story, and they can make things happen. Now, the teacher knows the red line, and we talk about the red line can bend, but it mustn't break. It mustn't go so far away from the original story. But within that, children can make lots and lots of things happen, and this is a lovely feeling for them. They can create all sorts of wonderful scenarios. I often take the example of the family because I think it's a very powerful one, that in fact I need for my story families to be made. And I say to groups of children in the class, I would like for you to decide who you would like to be in a family. And they have to negotiate, and then they create a family. And we usually, as you know, make a little visual of some kind of a family member to represent the character. Now, as soon as you have that, it's such a powerful thing. I haven't said what model the family should take, so they explain their model to me. And it may be that the father is not there or the mother's not there. And I accept this as their family. And they have to tell me why this is the situation and so on. But in that group, there could well be a child whose mother or father are not at home. So it's reflecting the design of the family that they have. Or it could be that a child would make a father that he doesn't have at home. And therefore they can talk about what it's like to have a dad and so on. We can talk about what it's like to be a mum with a 13-year-old daughter, and how the daughter feels and how the mother feels, and what's the role of the mother, and what's the role of the father in the family. What about family rules? I mean, all of these things can be dealt with in, I think, a very secure and therapeutic kind of setting, without any difficulties being, without embarrassing children.